And welcome to this week's edition of Rains on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Rains, Mike Rains, together in person. The weather, what a great weather week we're having in St. Louis, especially for the middle of August, just unbelievable. So we moved the studio out to the back porch and decided to take advantage of the weather.
Absolutely. It's been really hot, so we're glad to have the break.
Tried to show off the nature behind us, but that dark versus the light didn't work, so we did bring a plant in just to show that we really are outside here in the weather. Of course, beautiful nights down at the ballpark this week as well, and actually the results on the field have been better the last couple of nights as well.
They have been, for sure. After a little bit of a rough trip in Chicago, you turned around when you got back home.
Righted that ship a little bit, I think, by finding a team that's worse than the Cardinals with batting with runners in scoring position.
And that's hard to do this year.
1 out of 23 Tampa Bay for these first two games of the series, which, of course, as we're broadcasting here on Thursday, I think told the tale of the difference in those two ballgames.
And it was nice to see the Cardinals finally come through with a few hits with guys on base.
And got the pitching that I think we expect them to do. Sonny Gray, got off to a rocky start in the first game of the series without walking a 2-run homer, but then pitched really well after that. Eric Fetty got himself in trouble on Wednesday night, but was able to get out of that and get 5 innings to get his first win for the Cardinals.
Yeah, he looked much better this time around than he did in Chicago, for sure. 5 innings, 6 strikeouts, certainly looked like he had a lot more control, a lot more command.
And I think that's understandable. I mean, even if a veteran pitcher who's had success at the big league level, you move to a new ball club, the first game, it's going to be a little bit of jitters and a little bit of, butterflies and things like that. And just unfortunately, one bad inning kind of cost him that ball game. But nice to see him right the ship a little bit on his second start in his Busch Stadium debut.
It's also tough going to a whole new catcher, right? Because he doesn't know your game. You don't know him. And so you're trying to figure out what pitches to call when and what as a catcher, what does a pitcher like to throw in this situation versus, a different situation. So it's going to take some time to get used to it, but they certainly looked like they had that figured out last night.
Thanks, of course, to all of our sponsors here at stlsportspage.com, particularly our two main podcast sponsors, Archwell Health and Drury Hotels. You can get the links to their websites elsewhere here on the website. So thanks to them for sponsoring the podcast, as well as all of our other sponsors for making all of our content here, coverage of the Cardinals, free with no paywalls behind them. So we couldn't do what we do without them, and we really do appreciate them, and we encourage you to check them out as well for anything that you might need that they can offer, whether it's Archwell Health or Drury Hotels. Of course, if you're traveling late summer travel plans, be sure to check out all the Drury Hotels. Probably have a hotel most of the places that you want to go. Certainly, of course, around Cardinal Nation.
Absolutely, yes. Check them out.
There are some signs of concern that we have to mention a little bit about the Cardinals. The first one, of course, that's happened this week was the injury to Michael Ciani. I think you and I both would agree that if you put a list of players who have outperformed their expectations when we went into this season, Michael Ciani would either be 1 or 1A on the top of that list. I know the offense lately has been better, but the overall average for the season is down. But what a job he's done in center field, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Cardinals replace him for the next month or so.
You look at his defensive runs saved, and he's been phenomenal. He's been at the top of the list for sure. And the hope is you got a guy like Victor Scott, who you don't lose a whole lot in defense with him out there. And he gave you a big 2-run home run to tie the game on Monday night. And so it'd be nice to, see that happen again. So if you can find a guy like Victor that can pick up the offense side of Ciani and cover the same defense, you'd really luck out well. But you need him to make sure that he figures it out this time around.
Of course, if the Cardinals don't know that Ciani is going to get hurt, you probably don't trade Dylan Carlson and Tommy Edman both, and you probably hang on to one of those guys. Kind of ironic that you trade 2 center fielders or potential center fielders, and then 3 days later the guy you have confidence in gets hurt. And we don't know for sure how long Ciani is going to be out, but unfortunately, an oblique injury like that, I think 3 to 4 weeks is probably a minimum expectation for him to be out, and then bouncing back from that injury sometimes is not easy as well. You saw Newbar go through it earlier this year. You saw Carpenter go through one earlier this year. So just have to wait and see on that. Victor, of course, has been hitting the ball better lately down in Memphis, made a switch with his swing. Ryan Ludwig, one of the roving minor league hitting instructors, worked with him, and that kind of changed his approach to hit a little bit of a leg kick now that he's added. He did have success with that the last week or so that he was in Memphis. And as you mentioned, hit the home run on Tuesday night in that first game against Tampa Bay. So hopefully that will be a sign of things to come. And I think it's also going to be a confidence builder for him. I think, unfortunately, he got the job to start the season in center field because of the injury to Carlson right at the end of spring training. He'd already been sent out to the minor leagues, even though he had a really good spring. I thought, Scott did. And who knows how he would have played at Memphis had he started the season there, but got out of necessity, came up to be the center fielder and was overmatched. I think he would tell you that offensively. And it took him a while to get going down in Memphis. He really wasn't hitting that well. I think he was at 219 overall for the season at Memphis. So, and his first year at Triple too. So it'll be interesting to see now with this adjustment. If we can get some hits, get some confidence going, maybe that'll make a difference.
And when you're comparing Victor to Michael Ciani, you're not losing much in defense. They're both very similar, well above average defenders, and they're both very quick. They both can run, their speed, and make up for it. But I think the difference is Victor's got more power. And so if he can hit, and you saw that in the home run the other day, so if he can figure out that average a little bit, you could actually get a boost to this offense with Ciani going down that you didn't have before.
And the thing, too, about it is you also could play Nootbaar in center. You also could play Tommy Pham in center. So they do have some other options out there. But then the thing is, most of the times, Victor is probably going to be hitting ninth like Ciani was hitting ninth. And as far as the offense goes, if you're counting on your ninth place hitter to be carrying the offense, you probably got other problems first and foremost.
You got a lot of other problems.
Which I think we would agree. It's kind of the case sometimes here with this team. Of course, we mentioned the runners in scoring position situation kind of jokingly, but the other part of this whole thing is, and I think there's two ways to approach this. To look at the Cardinals season right now, you play basically 2/3 of the season. You've got just under 50 games to go, so just under the last third to go here as we start the stretch run. And again, it's going to be a really tough schedule for the Cardinals. We've talked about how this stretch of games that they're in right now, the 3 games that they play in Cincinnati next week, the only 3 games on the schedule between now and September 10th that are against teams with a losing record. So it's going to be tough. And you're not only chasing the Brewers, trying to get the division, you're 6 games out as we speak, but you're also down 3 or 4 other clubs on the wild card. And that might even be a tougher race than the division, because when you have that many teams in front of you, odds are that at least one of them is going to be winning every night.
Absolutely. And I think the schedule is really tough and is going to be a problem. But I think the one key to this whole thing, to me, the X factor in this whole thing is Ryan Helsley. Because if he comes in and pitches like he did Thursday night in Chicago when you're losing a game and blows it like that you got a serious problem to worry about. But if he can come in and shut it down like he did the other night and not give up a few hits, I think that's the key. Now, how much he gets used the rest of this season is going to be probably a little bit of a challenge to that too. But to me, Ryan Helsley is one of the biggest factors in shutting these games and keeping these close games in the favor of the Cardinals.
Because when you do have a lead going into the last innings, last couple innings, you want to win that game. I mean, you don't want to lose a game that you should win, because you're going to be fighting for every win, basically. I mean, this club's 3 games over 500 at the moment, and I think we both realize that if you're going to get in the playoffs, you're going to probably have to be more than 3 games over 500. So for them to win more games than they lose over this stretch of tough games, you got to expect they're going to be close, 3-run games or less, and that's going to be Helsley getting the bulk of those save opportunities. And I will say, even though he's kind of cracked a little bit, he gave up a hit and a walk on Thursday night as well against Tampa Bay. He still got the save. Almost more times than not, he's gotten the save. He's up to 36 saves for the season.
And that's the important part, right? As long as he gets the save and we get the win. But what happened in Chicago can't happen, and if he came out and said you were getting 3 out of 4 saves, I guess that's okay. But
that's not enough.
When you're not winning enough games by a lot, you need your closer in 3-run games or less to shut it down.
I think he's got 3 blown saves now, if I remember right. So 36 saves, 3 blown saves. That's a pretty good percentage. And actually, I think at least one of those 3, they blew the save. They still got the win. So
and he missed the first one of the season, but then 3 of the last 4 have been here within the last couple of weeks. So that's the worrisome part, right? You want to make sure that he keeps it locked down, and hopefully, getting him right back out there to get the win against Tampa Bay the other night was helpful.
And I don't think that's an abnormal performance for a closer. I remember when Jason Isringhausen was saving a lot of games for the Cardinals, he had some issues like that too. And I remember going on the post-game radio show and saying that he changed his nickname from Izzy to Iffy, and kind of got in trouble for saying that, but that was a long time ago. So Helsley doesn't have any nicknames like that.
And Trevor Rosenthal did the same thing a little bit too, right? I mean, all of these guys do a little bit, and it makes you nervous. But as long as you get the win, that's the important part.
I guess the key to that is to get more than a 3-run lead, so you don't have to worry about that 9th inning drama.
And that's what you need for sure, right? And maybe the spark of Tommy Pham has helped that, right? Look at Tuesday night when he came right back up. All of that done with 2 outs, right? It seems to be when we do our best hitting, but seems to be trending in the right direction in the last couple of days.
So here's what I kind of wanted to go with this as we Rob Raines and Mike Raines talk here on the STL Sports page, Raines on the Cardinals podcast. We played 2/3 of the season, basically, a little under 1/3 to go. You're put 3 games over 500. Do you see any signs that anything is going to be different for this team the rest of this season than what we've already seen so far?
They certainly don't show any signs of that direction, right? But I still think this team has not played what they're capable of playing, right? Because when this team first started, we all thought this offense was going to score 5 and 6 runs a game, right? And they're still capable of doing that because these guys are major league hitters, but Paul Goldschmidt has to wake up if you want that to happen.
And that's kind of where I was going with this thing is you got Nolan Arenado, you got Paul Goldschmidt. More times than not, they're hitting somewhere between 3rd and 6th in the lineup almost every night. Doesn't matter if the right-hander pitching, doesn't matter if the left-hander pitching. Goldschmidt did have a scheduled day off on Wednesday in the second game of that series against Tampa Bay, but he is over 18 in a slump right now, hitless his last 18 at-bats. He's still hitting 174 for the season with runners in scoring position, 3 extra base hits, in 115 plate appearances with a runner in scoring position. For the Cardinals to do anything better than being a 500 team or slightly better than 500 team, Goldschmidt and Arenado have got to lead the offense.
They do, absolutely, right? And I think the problem is you see the player that Goldie could be, right? You see the MVP caliber years that he's had just previously, and you still think it's going to be there at some point, but when is it going to click, right? And you need him in this second half of the season here, the last third, to really get it done. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
And one of the difficult parts of being in charge of a major league team, whether you're talking about being the field manager, you're talking about being in the front office, to me, it's a balancing act, right? You have the short term, we need to win tonight game. You have the medium term, what are we going to do the rest of this season, and what this week and the regular season, and then you have the long term, starting in 2025 and going forward. So Goldschmidt, to me, is right in the middle of all of those decisions. And what do we do? He's a free agent at the end of the year. The Cardinals made a decision before spring training started that they were not going to offer him a contract extension at that point, wanting to wait and see how the season went. Obviously, the first half of the season did not go well, so there was not really any talk about a contract extension at that point. There has been talk lately of them wanting to re-sign him this winter. Even letting him hit free agency because of the way the contracts work, the requirements as far as having to offer a guy, 80% of his salary for the previous year, that kind of thing. So he would probably hit free agency first because then those rules disappear about what you have to offer them. But still, do you think re-signing Paul Goldschmidt is a good idea?
Well, when you look at the way that Alec Burleson has played, does he show any signs of slowing down? And he got off to such a hot start, and he really hasn't. So is there any reason that you wouldn't want Alec Burleson to be your everyday first baseman next year?
Not in my mind right now. I mean, again, unless, Goldschmidt's very capable, as we mentioned, of going on a tear and hitting 400, hitting, 15 home runs in between now and the end of the season. And then maybe you change your mind. But to me, if I had to make a decision today, I would thank Paul Goldschmidt for his services and wish him well if he decides to continue playing somewhere next year. And I would commit to Alec Burleson to be my first baseman in 2025.
And I would go on the record to say that if Paul Goldschmidt does go on a tear and hits even 300 the rest of the season or 350, this team will make a serious run because that bat is needed that much in the lineup that everyone else will go with him. If he can hit 300 the rest of the year, this team will go on a serious run and contend, I would think, even for the division.
But we all know, too, that the Cardinals have a budget that they work within. They're not the highest spending team in baseball. They're not the lowest by any means, but they do have a reasonable amount of budget. So if you have a choice between paying one guy $20 million a year and probably more than just a one-year contract, or do you have a choice of paying a guy, $2 million a year who right now has been a much more productive player? I'm going to side with the $2 million player.
The question becomes,
there's no offense to Paul Goldschmidt. I like the guy. He's a terrific guy. He's been a great Cardinal, a great role model on it, done a lot of great charitable things on and off the field, but he's 37 years old.
The biggest question becomes the track record, right? And you look at Paul Goldschmidt's career, and he's proven that he can do this a lot better and a lot longer than Alec Burleson has. And I think that's where you tend to side with the proven player and the veteran. And that's why Goldschmidt's still playing first and still getting a chance to bat every day, because at some point he's going to figure this out. At least we hope.
And it's why he's in the lineup the majority of times, unless he's got a day off, because they feel that he's earned that right.
But
and the toughest thing, and somebody said this one time ago, and I don't remember if it was Jim Leland or somebody else in that category of Hall of Fame managers, who said one of the problems of being a manager, and I think it might even be more true, especially with a younger manager, less experience, which is, even though he's been here 3 years now, Ali Marmol still qualifies as, I think, the youngest manager in Major League Baseball, managing a veteran player who's had a great, successful, borderline Hall of Fame career, who's on the downside of his career. Managing that player is an incredibly hard assignment.
And there's no question about it that it's challenging. And I think as fans, we all feel bad for Paul Goldschmidt, right? Because we want him to be that MVP player, and so we're rooting for him to be there. But as fans, we also want to see the team win. And if his bat's not helping us, we need somebody that's going to help us.
And here's the situation, too, though, as you look at going forward. If they re-sign him, I don't think they're re-signing him to be a backup player. No, if you re-sign him, you're expecting him to still be your starting first baseman, maybe DH a little bit, but defensively he's been fine. But I mean, I think that's, and then you move Burleson back to the outfield, which means where you put Jordan Walker again. I mean, Victor Scott, you've got, some other kids coming. I mean, to me, there's, as I say, that whole balancing act between the short term and the long term, it's going to be really fascinating to me to see how they handle the Paul Goldschmidt situation.
I think the rest of this month of August will really show us what they do. And if Goldschmidt finds a way to step it up and hit well this month, then it's a different story. If it's continuing the same that it has so far, and as we talk about performance, it brings me to my trivia question I want to ask.
Okay.
So as we look
at the last 30 days,
the last 30 days of stats for just the Cardinals.
I'm going to get a drink of water. I think you're in.
Who leads this team in strikeouts in the last 30 days?
You mean from an offensive standpoint?
Batting, offensive standpoint.
My first answer will be Nolan Gorman.
Incorrect.
Goldschmidt?
Yes.
Okay.
And he's tied with
Tommy Pham?
Wilson Contreras at 28.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be Pham. He had a minute.
Now, on the flip side, over the last 30 days, who's leading this team in average?
Mason Witt.
Nolan Arenado.
Okay.
278. Now, is that going to get the job done? Not necessarily, but when you look at these small sample sizes, over the last 30, 15, and 7 days, Arenado's leading in average in all three of those categories. So the hope is you're trending in the right direction. You got to look at the small sample size to see as we're moving. Now, that's not saying he's going to turn around tomorrow, but
we did get the big 2-run double. And he has chipped in some hits when they mattered. I mean, Arenado I'm talking about.
And that's what I'm saying. So, like, if everyone else can go and you still bat Paul Goldschmidt 6 or 7, it's not the end of the world if the rest of the team is going around him. But
you can always carry one guy, it seems like. It's when the whole team is struggling offensively. And that gets back to the Victor Scott thing. If there are other guys doing what they're capable of doing offensively, then Scott just can play defense, steal bases, draw some, and maybe get a hit here and, move up a runner. I mean, do some little things to help you.
For sure. It's obviously a whole team process. It's going to win this league and win this season. But from an offensive standpoint, if you look at the small sample size, the team is trending in the right direction because they've scored a lot of runs. We may have lost some of these games like we did, in Chicago, but we're scoring runs. And so that's the first part of the battle. The second part of the battle is your bullpen and your starting pitching have to keep those runs down. And you look at Eric Fetty, he turned it around a little bit. You hope Kyle Gibson can do it tonight.
I don't have the stat in front of me, but I do know that the Cardinals have a pretty significant winning record above 500 when they score 4 more runs in a game. And I think that's the Major League average, too. I mean, I think the majority,
absolutely,
not just the Cardinals, but Major League team that scores 4 more runs has a lot better chance to win. You were looking up earlier, too, the playoff odds right now, and they're not that great in the Cardinals' favor.
They're not. No, I think they've dropped to like 19% for the chances for the Cardinals to make postseason right now. But the other thing to look at, too, is since the trade deadline, how many runs have we scored per game since we've gotten Tommy Pham? I'm not saying he's the right answer, but if you look at the average of runs we're scoring per game over the last 2 weeks since the trade deadline, it's trending in the right direction.
Sure. And that's why they've made the trade, is they thought he would be a boost, especially against left-handed pitching, which is an area where they've really struggled, again, because of how Goldschmidt, Arenado, and Contreras had not really picked up the ball at that point. So,
and if you look at Tuesday night's game, they got the win against a left-handed pitcher.
Correct.
Which we have not played well against this year. But if we can start to turn that around, we're looking the right direction.
Always encourage you to check out all of our other Cardinal coverage here on stlsportspage.com. We do a game report every night. We have audio from the ballpark as well if you just want to listen to some of the post-game interviews. But one of the things that I do each year, and it just came out on Wednesday, is I go through a process to re-rank the prospects in the Cardinal organization. And wait till after the draft is over, wait till after the trade deadline is over to do that. And this year's list just came out on Wednesday, so I encourage you to check that out elsewhere on the site. Really an in-depth look. We ranked the top 24 prospects in the organization. It was not just my list. It's a list compiled with scouts and other personnel as well that helped kind of put that list together. New name at the top, Tink Hence. Of course, everybody I think recognizes Tink's name. He's been on the radar now for a while as far as being the number one pitching prospect in the organization, one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. He's on the mound on Thursday night for Springfield. He's had some injury troubles this year that really limited his pitch total, but they'll still think he's an electric arm that just turned 22. It's going to be a guy that people want to know. And the other reason I hope you check out the list this year as opposed to some other years is we do a little bit different ranking system. Just arbitrarily, this is the 9th year in a row that we've done this. Anybody who's 25 or older does not make our list because to me, that getting a little bit bold to be a prospect, even though they might still have some big league ability coming. Anybody who has made his major league debut is not eligible to be on our list. So you're not going to see Victor Scott on our list. You're not going to see Gordon Rosefo on our list. You're not going to see Michael McGreevy on our list. You're not going to see Ivan Herrera on our list. Whereas a lot of the prospect lists that other media outlets put out there, they include those guys as long as they still have rookie eligibility at the big league level. So that's the difference between our list and their other list. And because of that, we have a lot other new players, younger players in the organization that maybe fans are not as familiar with. There's some kids, 17-year-old. We have 6 teenagers on this list. And there's some of them, especially young teenage pitchers at the Dominican Summer League level, who I think just have a chance to be terrific. So encourage you to check out that list. Encourage you to check out some of these names. And they're going to be really interesting guys to follow as we go forward here in the next couple of years.
And it gives you another reason to go check out Drury Hotels and check out some of these minor league teams and go watch those young kids that really know how to play and are exciting young players in the organization.
We've written a lot about Quinn Matthews. He's very high on the list. J.J. Weatherholt, the Cardinals' first pick in this year's draft, hit his first professional home run on Wednesday night. He's very high. He's very high on the list. I'm not going to tell you any of the other numbers. I want to make you go read the list. But I think you'll recognize some of the names near the top of the list. But I say that try to learn some of the names that are on the bottom half of the list because they're going to be guys that are moving up pretty soon, I think, in the organization. So.
Always exciting when you got the young kids coming up and making an impact on it.
Correct. And we saw that already this year with guys. Mason Wynn. Mason Wynn was number 1 on this list last year. So look where he is this year. So Cardinals, as we mentioned, in the midst of the schedule, 1 game left against Tampa Bay. Then the schedule oddities because of the balanced schedule that they only have a 2-game series against the Royals. Friday and Saturday they play in Kansas City against Bobby Witt Jr., arguably the American League MVP. That's going to be a really interesting race, whether it's him or Judge to be the MVP. I'm actually kind of glad I don't have an American League MVP vote this year because that's going to be interesting. But anyway, then they're off on Sunday, a rare day off. Of course, the choice was, are we off on Friday or are you off on Sunday? And they elected to be off on Sunday and then go to Cincinnati to start the 3-game series against the Reds on Monday.
This is going to be a tough stretch for sure. A lot of good teams, a lot of good games. And like we've said before, down this stretch before we end the season, we still have 6 left against Milwaukee. So as long as you're within 6, you're within striking distance of the division still. And I think anyone in that organization would tell you, they're not looking at a wild card. They're looking at the division. That's what they want to win, and that's what they're shooting for.
Well, you're chasing less teams. You're only chasing one team, and when you beat them head-to-head, you move up a game. So after that Cincinnati series, the Dodgers in town for 3, and then that first series against Milwaukee. So a lot of good, exciting baseball coming up in August. Here's your trivia question. When the Dodgers come into town, what will Shohei Ohtani be trying to do that he has never done against the Cardinals?
Hit a home run?
The only major league team that Shohei Ohtani has not homered against is the St. Louis Cardinals.
Well, let's hope we don't see it. But I think it's kind of become, as they call him, quote-unquote, matchup proof, that it doesn't really matter who's pitching. He's one of a kind. And
he's actually moved into the leadoff spot for them with Betts being out is to really help the Dodgers. That race between them and the Padres is going to be fun to watch, too. The Padres are playing really well under Mike Schultz.
There's a lot of tight races all the way across the board, and it's going to be exciting baseball through the last 2 months.
Well, thank you for coming over to doing our show in person instead of on the Zoom there. So hope everybody's enjoyed this edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Be sure to check out all of our other coverage here on stlsportspage.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day. how he stops.